Imagine this. You're a European sailor in the early 1400s, navigating the icy, unforgiving waters of the North Atlantic. Your ship cuts through the fog as Greenland's coastline emerges, a rugged, frozen land that once pulsed with life. You dock at a familiar Viking settlement, but something is off. There are no welcoming voices, no smoke rising from chimneys. Homes stand silent, churches are empty, fields are overgrown, animals are gone, and the people vanished. This wasn't a small outpost. For nearly 500 years, Norse settlers lived here, built farms, raised families, and carved out a civilization on the edge of the known world. But by the mid-15th century, they were simply gone. No mass graves, no signs of war, no farewell messages carved into stone, just silence. What happened to them? Did they starve? Freeze? Were they killed? Or did they abandon everything? While the mystery of Roanoke gets the headlines, the Lost Colony of Greenland might be one of history's most haunting disappearances. And today, we're diving deep into the forgotten saga of the Norse, who disappeared into the Arctic night. To understand the mystery, we need to go back over 1,000 years, before skyscrapers, smartphones, and even the discovery of the Americas. Around 985 AD, a bold and controversial Norseman named Eric the Red set sail from Iceland, banished for manslaughter. With nothing to lose and icy ambition in his heart, he sailed west and discovered a vast, rugged land, Greenland. The name, he believed, would attract settlers, and it worked. Within a few years, ships full of Norse families followed him, chasing the dream of a new life on untamed shores. They established two main settlements on the southwestern edge of Greenland, the Eastern Settlement and the more remote Western Settlement. At their height, these colonies supported around 2,000 to 3,000 people, with farms, churches, livestock, and a surprisingly structured society connected to Europe by trade routes stretching across the Atlantic. For centuries, they thrived, despite the brutal climate and isolation. But by the 15th century, the Western settlement had vanished completely. A few decades later, the Eastern settlement followed. When a Danish missionary arrived in the 1720s, he found ruins, not people. The Norse had disappeared, and no one could say why. Unlike other historical disappearances, this one leaves no written record from those who vanished. All we have are ruins, bones, and a puzzle that historians have tried to piece together for generations. In this video, we'll explore not just the when and how, but the why. From shifting climates to cultural rigidity, and from trade collapse to possible assimilation with native Inuit populations. This is the untold story of the Greenland Vikings, and the warning they may have left behind. At first glance, settling Greenland might seem like a death sentence, but to the Norse, it was a fresh start, a land of opportunity on the edge of the world. And surprisingly, they made it work. Using techniques from Iceland and Norway, they built longhouses from stone and turf to survive the bitter Arctic winds. They raised cattle, sheep, goats, and grew limited crops like barley during the short summers. Hunting caribou and fishing along the coasts helped supplement their diet. Religion was central to their lives. Christianity had taken root in the Norse world by the time Greenland was settled. They built churches, held Christian rituals, and even had a bishop appointed to oversee the faithful. The ruins of stone churches, like those at Hvalsey, still stand today, quiet testaments to their spiritual life and sense of permanence. But life wasn't easy. Greenland was harsh and unforgiving. Winters were long, farming conditions were poor, And while they were skilled seafarers, they remained cut off for long periods from the outside world. Trade was vital. The Greenland Norse exported walrus ivory, seal skins, and falcons to Europe in exchange for iron, timber, and luxury goods. This connection kept them tied to the broader medieval world. But it was a fragile lifeline, one easily broken. Meanwhile, they weren't alone. The Inuit people had long inhabited the Arctic and knew how to thrive there. While early Norse records speak of hostile encounters, calling them skrylings, archaeological evidence suggests there may have also been trade, borrowing, or even cohabitation in later centuries. Still, despite the hardships, the Greenland Norse built a functioning society for nearly 500 years. And then, just as mysteriously as they came, they vanished. By the early 1400s, something strange was happening in Greenland. The once thriving Western settlement, home to hundreds of Norse farmers, went eerily silent. No more ships arrived from Europe. No messages. No news. And by around 1408, the last known written record from the eastern settlement described a wedding held in Valsey Church. After that, the historical trail goes cold, completely. When European visitors eventually returned to Greenland, they were met not with people, but with ruins. Stone churches stood empty, their roofs long gone. Homes had collapsed, tools rusted, and pastures had become wild once again. There were no signs of war or mass death, no bodies, no written explanations left behind. The Greenland Norse had seemingly vanished without a trace. In the 1720s, a missionary named Hans Egede was sent by the Danish crown to re-establish contact with what was assumed to be a surviving Norse population. Instead, he found only Inuit communities and abandoned ruins. The colony was gone, and no one living could tell him why. This wasn't a forgotten village. This was a European outpost that had lasted nearly 500 years, built on faith, family, and survival. And its disappearance wasn't due to a single catastrophic event, but a slow unraveling that left no clear clues. Historians have been piecing together fragments ever since, but the truth may never be fully known. What we do know is that somewhere between climate, culture, and contact, the Norse of Greenland slipped quietly out of history and into legend. So what truly happened to the Norse settlers of Greenland? Historians and archaeologists have proposed several theories, each shedding light on a different piece of the mystery. Most likely, it wasn't a single cause, but a perfect storm of pressures that quietly dismantled the colony. Perhaps the most widely accepted theory centers around the Little Ice Age, a period of global cooling that began in the 14th century. As temperatures dropped, Greenland's already short-growing season became even shorter. Pastures shrank under snow. Livestock died from starvation. Crops failed. The Norse, who relied heavily on farming and grazing animals, suddenly found themselves fighting a losing battle with nature. Unlike the Inuit, they weren't adapted to live off the sea ice or hunt marine animals year-round. As the climate worsened, food scarcity increased, and survival became more difficult with each passing winter. For centuries, Greenland depended on trade with Norway and Iceland. The Norse exported walrus ivory, animal hides, and even exotic birds in exchange for crucial supplies like iron, wood, grain, and cloth. But by the late 1300s, European tastes were changing. Elephant ivory from Africa became more accessible and desirable than walrus tusks. At the same time, the Black Death decimated Norway's population, weakening its economy and naval capacity. Fewer ships meant fewer voyages, and soon, Greenland was left isolated, with no incoming supplies or communication from Europe. Without trade, Greenland couldn't import what it couldn't grow. Their world shrank, and the lifeline that connected them to the rest of civilization was severed. One of the more debated theories blames not the environment, but the settlers themselves. The Norse of Greenland were culturally conservative. They clung tightly to European farming traditions, even as those methods became unsustainable in Greenland's changing climate. The Inuit, by contrast, thrived in the Arctic by adapting to its challenges: ice fishing, hunting seals and whales, building kayaks and igloos, and wearing clothing made from animal skins. But the Norse largely refused to adopt these practices. Instead of evolving, they doubled down on what they knew, even when it no longer worked. This rigidity may have sealed their fate. In a brutal environment, adaptation is survival, and the Norse, proud of their European identity, simply didn't adapt fast enough. Another theory raises a critical question. Did the Norse vanish, or did they blend in? Some suggest a more complex interaction between the Norse and the Inuit, ranging from conflict to peaceful coexistence. Early Norse texts describe hostile encounters with the Skraelings, but archaeological evidence hints at trade and possible cultural exchange in later years. Could it be that as Norse society collapsed, some survivors intermarried, traded, or even joined Inuit communities to survive? If so, their disappearance might not have been a total vanishing, but a quiet transformation, absorbed into a culture better suited for Arctic life. With harsher winters and dwindling supplies, it's no stretch to imagine famine taking hold. Malnutrition would have weakened the population, making them vulnerable to disease. Bones found at Greenland sites show signs of stunted growth and poor health, especially among children. Combined with isolation, even a minor epidemic could have been catastrophic. No doctors, no medicine, no help coming. Entire families may have succumbed in silence. Lastly, Greenland's fate may have been sealed, not just by what happened on the island, but what happened beyond it. By the 15th century, Europe was changing. The Catholic Church was shifting its focus, and new trade routes were emerging. Greenland, once a point of pride for Norse explorers, became an afterthought. With no political or economic incentive, the Crown simply stopped caring. Even Christianity's hold may have faded. Some believe the Norse clung to their churches until the very end, but with no bishop, no tithes, and no contact with Rome, faith may have withered alongside the colony. In the end, the disappearance of the Norse in Greenland wasn't sudden. It was a slow erosion, played out over generations. A story of people who braved the edge of the world, but couldn't hold on forever. Centuries after the Norse vanished from Greenland, archaeologists began piecing together the remains of their forgotten world. And while the stones don't speak, they whisper clues. Excavations of farms, churches, and burial sites have revealed a society that clung to life in one of the harshest environments imaginable. Animal bones, for instance, tell a story of changing diets. Early settlements show a balanced mix of livestock and wild game. But in later layers, there's a noticeable shift. More seal bones, fewer cattle, a sign that desperation pushed them toward marine hunting, even if it went against their cultural norms. The ruins of Valsey Church, the best preserved Norse structure in Greenland, remain eerily intact. Its final known use, a wedding in 1408, is the last written trace of the Greenland Norse. No diaries, no tombstones with final dates, just stone walls and silence. Grave sites have provided even more insight. Skeletal remains show signs of malnutrition, arthritis, and dental disease, evidence of a hard, declining life. But perhaps most intriguing are the DNA studies. Researchers hoped to find connections between Norse remains and modern Greenlandic Inuit populations, which could support theories of assimilation. So far, results have been inconclusive, revealing no definitive genetic overlap. Yet, much remains uncertain. No mass graves have been found, no battle damage, no written goodbye. And many settlements remain unexcavated, buried beneath layers of ice, earth, and time. Modern technology continues to offer new tools: satellite imaging, ice core analysis, isotopic dating. But the ultimate answer may remain just out of reach. Greenland holds its secrets tightly, and the true fate of its Norse settlers might never be fully known. The disappearance of the Norse Greenlanders wasn't the result of a single disaster. It was a slow, painful unraveling. A mix of environmental collapse, cultural rigidity, economic isolation, and changing global dynamics quietly erased a civilization that had endured for nearly 5 centuries. Their story isn't just about loss. It's a powerful lesson in adaptation, or the lack of it. The Norse settlers, proud of their European identity, held on to traditions that no longer served them in a changing world. While the Inuit adapted and thrived, the Norse clung to what they knew and vanished. Today, as we face our own global challenges, climate change, economic disruption, cultural divisions, the story of Greenland's lost colony feels less like a historical footnote and more like a warning. What happened in Greenland wasn't loud. It didn't make headlines. It was quiet, gradual, forgotten. And that raises a haunting question. If an entire European colony could disappear without a trace, what else has history lost to time? The ruins remain. The land remembers. But the voices of the Norse Greenlanders? They're gone, whispering only through the snow and stone they left behind.